Welcome back to another episode of the XRP podcast. Today is going to be a good one. You guys do not want to miss it. I am going to have Rupert from Allin Crypto, and it's going to be good because we're going to dive into a lot of concepts around XRP, the strength of the XRP Army, but also dive into some of the key things that are happening in not only the token, but also in the market. And of course, that will lay into some things that President Trump said. It'll get into topics around Peter Thiel. We'll talk about really the future of Ripple as a company. It's going to be a good one. You guys don't want to miss it. By the way, if you are not aware, sometimes I think people are a little confused on how we're doing certain things here on the channel. So I want to make sure everybody kind of understands. One thing that we do, of course, as you guys probably know, is we have two channels. The primary channel is the one that you probably have seen more so than anyone, and that is Paul Barron Network. You guys can visit that, just Paul Barron Network on YouTube. Closing in on 1.7 million subs. I think we're going to hit 2 million this year. So all because of guys like you, people like you that are out there in the crypto community. But our other channel that is one that you should pay attention to is the one you're watching right now. And this is the one that, of course, is where we're really starting to focus right there on XRP, get a lot more into diving deep, getting the best of the best in this industry. And of course, that's been our focus here on the Paul Barron podcast. And that's the show you're watching right now. So you guys, of course, can catch some of our most recent. We had Jay Claver on here recently. Also had Canary Capital on. Man, Steven was an absolute rock star. Go back and check that video out right there that I'm hovering over. It was a banger, and it really got into where the XRP ETF is going to be heading. And I think that is something, guys, to pay attention to right now. So I wanted to bring on our guest today, and then, of course, you got a sneak peek of him right there. But that, of course, is Rupert coming in from Allin Crypto. How are you, Rupert?
I'm great, thank you, Paul. It's a pleasure to be on here. Long-time viewer of your channel, and it's an honor to be with you on the show.
Yeah, listen, it's great. If you guys have not checked out Rupert's channel, you should. One thing you can do, of course, is head over to Allin Crypto right there on YouTube. I'll bring it up for you guys if you haven't seen it. I'm sure you're subscribers, but if you're not, hit that subscribe button. We're going to do it right now. There, bam! Now we are subscribers to the Allin Crypto channel, and there's a reason that we bring guys like Rupert on, and that is their expertise in the space. So Rupert, let's kind of just go into it a little bit. You've covered a couple of things here recently around XRP. And before we get into the news, price action, Bitcoin all-time high, all that good stuff, is there anything that you're watching right now that is like got your radar up significantly?
In regards to XRP?
XRP, yeah.
But yeah, so certainly the ending of the lawsuit. I mean, that has got to be on everybody's radar. That's been a battle that has been fought for a long time now, and that's come to a conclusion. Maybe not the conclusion everybody wanted, but I think the significance of this can't be understated. There's been a major hurdle put in XRP and Ripple's way, really, and that is this lawsuit. And now that that's been finalized, I think we're going to see people come out the woodworks in regards to partnerships, proof of concepts, live use cases, as it revolves around the XRP ledger and, of course, integration with Ripple as a company. So that would be probably one of the main things right now I'm focused on. More broadly, but related to XRP, is everything happening in the United States with the Genius Act, the Clarity Act. I think it's just the best time there possibly could be to be in this space.
Crypto.
Absolutely.
It is. Well, listen, Rupert, we've had to go through shit for a long time.
Put it lightly, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this has not been an easy trek. If you've been in crypto for the last 2 years, the last 5 years, the last 10, you know what we've been through. And a lot of it has been ridicule. A lot of it has been, this will never work. What are you doing with your life, Paul? You're a upstanding businessman. You've created media companies. Where are you going with this crypto thing? And I'm like, listen, I catch trends in the beginning of how they start. I started in the tech field, started to identify trends, what was happening in retail commerce. That happened. Then I got into podcasting. In 2007, I started my own podcast, the first one, and not the first podcast, but my first podcast, first one in many industries. And people thought we were crazy. They were like, "This is just stupid. It's a toy hobby." So it doesn't surprise me when people push back, but I think now just what we're seeing is absolutely crazy and incredible for sure.
Validation for sure. It's been, like you say, an uphill battle, but I think we're over that hill now and we're on the other
Yes.
side of it where we're sort of coming down. And I think talking about you being early on trends, what you're doing here with a kind of XRP specific podcast is so unbelievably perfectly timed. It's kind of an accolade to all the things that you've done previously. So yeah, massive congratulations for everything that you're doing, Paul. And like I say, it's a pleasure to be here.
One of the things I want to kind of lead off with here on the show is something that struck me this week, and it was the interview between Nat Burnell and Michael Novagratz. Okay, and you guys probably saw it. I think we played a little bit of a clip on it. And Novagratz, who is, I would say, a top 10 Wall Street investor in terms of managing funds over at Galaxy Digital, and he made a defense play against a really strong Bitcoiner who I will say, we've had Nat Burnell on our show before, great lady, but I will say this, she is, and I won't say this badly, she is supported by the Bitcoin industry. And I call it an industry, because we have been approached many times. And I've never told this story before. We have been approached many times by Bitcoiners and have been directly asked, why do you still continue to talk about Ethereum? Why are you talking about altcoins? You're a respected authority in the industry. And when I was approached by that group, it immediately put me as a journalist, because I've dealt with this before, that immediately put up a reason for we need to dive deeper into all of this, because if there's clarity on groups that are factioning, there is clearly something here. And it's interesting because Mike Novagratz went in and said, listen, you may not like XRP, you may not like what Ripple's doing, but the fact is that there is a community behind this group that is undeniable. It's probably the number one community out there in the industry. And it's probably going to be the one that I think will take it to its next level. When you think about that, Rupert, especially around the XRP Army and the community itself, why do you think it has been so resilient through all of these really bad times?
I think it's because the XRP Army can really see the wood through the trees. They understand, which I think many Bitcoiners don't, what XRP is and what it was designed to do. And in some ways, I have sympathy for kind of Bitcoin maximalists in the sense that, Bitcoin really is special. But where they fundamentally go wrong is they try and apply the Bitcoin cover to every other crypto, and that's simply not the case.
Right.
And a massive testament or a massive accolade and congratulations to Ripple, that obviously founded or started off as OpenCoin and then subsequently later on in 2013 became Ripple. They saw this technology and they saw that Bitcoin was trying to enable a kind of alternative currency system, and the rails upon which that ran was distributed ledgers, a blockchain. They took that and essentially said, instead of using it to facilitate Bitcoin, let's upgrade the entire financial system with it. So XRP is fundamentally different in terms of its philosophy, its principles, its design to Bitcoin. And where I think maxis often get things wrong, they get a lot of things right, but what they get wrong is the fact that not everything is trying to be Bitcoin. XRP is not trying to work against the system, with it. And if you look at where we are today, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit, it couldn't have been more right on that vision, which seemed absurd back in 2013. So I think XRP holders really have seen the wood through the trees. They see real value, real utility, and a real winner here. And, I'm happy to be part of that community and happy that, you are also.
Well, I think the interesting point to me is the undeniable partnerships, technology. We're going to talk about some of the partnerships here in a little bit. But the tech itself, obviously, Ripple has been very diligent in their efforts. They have not wavered once. And I still attribute the success of Bitcoin, and people think I'm crazy on this, I attribute the success of Bitcoin and crypto specifically to the tenacity of Ripple in that case. They were not going to have it, and they knew that this was the line in the sand. And no matter who you are in crypto, it doesn't matter if you are Solana, Cardano, Avalanche. I've talked to all of the founders and top developers over there. And one thing they always have that is usually very interesting in terms of a statement is they always pay homage to what Ripple did. And that is they fought the early fight. It's, it's the first one through the wall that's the bloodiest. And I think that was where Ripple was. When you look at that case, finally getting to a settlement and this complete pivot of the SEC, Rupert, what do you make of what does this unleash for the ability to Ripple, for Ripple to grow now?
Yeah, I mean, there's no barriers to partnering with Ripple anymore. I mean, it's not just the case, it's everything that sort of came very timely in and around it, like the Genius Act, like broader clarity. I mean, the SEC chair, Paul Atkins, now announced Project Crypto. His own words are to enable a new financial era, to bring securities markets on chain. I mean, you're talking hundreds of trillions of dollars. So I think everything's come to a perfect head. And I think in regards to people who, one reason I think you've not seen as many companies publicly embrace crypto is due to fears of regulatory repercussion.
For sure.
And with the end to this case, certainly as it relates to Ripple and XRP specifically, you're now going to be enabled to see that. The case itself didn't really make that much sense in the sense that Ripple probably was only, whilst the rest of the industry was trying to fight the traditional financial system, Ripple, there's YouTube clips out there of Chris Larson actually at financial hearings in 2015 saying, look, here's what we're doing. We want to get on board. This is why we think it's actually going to benefit the traditional financial system and regulators instead of take away from it. So why this whole case was even brought around in the first place, there's still a lot of unanswered questions about that. I mean, Gensler, the one levying these charges, actually spoke about the need for a bridge currency back at the Peterson Institute in the case of, I believe, sending currency from Tanzania to Nigeria. He said, you're going to need an intermediary, and some of these cryptos are enabling it. And then he goes to penalize the very company actually solving that real world use case.
Right.
Strange, right? Very,
very strange. Well, and it's interesting because I think it's almost, you look at the amount, listen, I've been in and around these high level bankers for many years, and there is a clear strategy in how they go about their business. And one thing I wanted to play a clip of, this was interesting, this was Eric Trump yesterday. I'm going to bring this up real quick. And what he said should really show how close we came to, I think, total collapse of not only crypto, but possibly even the financial system. And this is let me kind of bring it over real quick and I'll show it to you guys. And I want to back it up a little bit here and bring it in.
It's infuriating. We had nowhere to go. Capital One stripped 300 bank accounts from me, 300 in the middle of the night. They sent us a letter after doing business for 20-something years. All your bank accounts for golf courses and condominium buildings and hotels, they're all gone in the middle of the night. I mean, how do you pay your taxes? How do you pay your employees? This happened across the board. It happened with JP Morgan Chase. It happened with Bank of America. It happened with First Republic. And this wasn't just happening to the Trumps, people with a lot of zeros on the end. This was happening to conservatives all over the country. We didn't have a damn choice. So before my father, won the election, before my father was in office, we started getting into cryptocurrency. The people in cryptocurrency were being debanked just like Trump was being debanked. Right. And you know what? It's become the fastest growing industry anywhere in the world. It's actually removed a lot of the power from the big banks who have weaponized their platforms against the American people, and I could not be more proud to be. I don't know, Brian.
All right, so I'm going to kick that one off. But what struck me there was the passion behind what Eric was talking about. Whether you like Trump, you don't like Trump, or you look at their family and just say, listen, this family has really done some interesting things. They're going to be one of the families, I think, that will go down in history as being early in many different cases, early in real estate, early in finance, early in entertainment, which is all their hospitality groups. And now, of course, with Wilfy, World Liberty Fi, they're early in crypto. But he drew something up that I think is very close to the XRP Army, and that is this idea that the system has always been working against people. And if they can work against people like the Trumps, imagine what they're doing against the average Joe. So this is the thing that I think crypto just brings this leveling. Do you think we are finally at that point where the banks and the current institutional system has finally realized maybe there's a different way?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think they can ignore it anymore. I don't think they can fight it legally anymore. I know just a couple of days ago, there was a pushback from a banking sort of association in the United States. It essentially cited a loophole that exchanges could use in regards to offering yield on stablecoins.
Yep.
Now, this terrifies them because if you can offer yield on stablecoins, you're essentially facilitating an alternative, a better alternative, a more yieldly alternative, we should say, to traditional banking.
Yeah.
And they have basically fought that tooth and nail. Why is it that we don't allow yield to be paid out to stablecoin issuers? That was wrote into the Genius Act. Well, the reason being is because it would really challenge the banking sector. So we're still seeing a major pushback. As far as this technology is concerned, it gets to a point where it becomes so evident that it should be used in replacement of the traditional legacy system and its fragmentations. And it's very much like a switchboard system.
Yeah.
That they can no longer ignore it. They have no other choice but to embrace it. We see this with technological revolutions throughout history. The internet was a perfect example. You still had major pushbacks, whether that's from the post office, whatever it may be, up until a point where it just becomes so obvious they have to go, okay, now it's time to adopt it. I think we're at that point now.
Yeah. Well, and I think the easy thing to pick here is watch what they are saying, because sometimes they'll tell you their strategy in plain sight. And you look at where we are right now on the Fed, where we are on SWIFT, and the potential changeover of where SWIFT could eventually be replaced by Ripple. And in the essence of that, you look at what's going on the global stage, because now you're talking about the US dollar valuation. Jake Claver and I talked about the reverse carry trade on the Japanese situation, which starts to push a lot of people into, is there a fallback position? Should we get into trouble with our treasuries? And this is one of the things that we're dealing with right now with the Fed, which of course has been very sticky on not changing rates. And of course, that's probably going to happen in September. But I want to play another clip for you. And this was something you and I talked about before the show. I'll bring it up real quick. This, of course, is President Trump addressing something very interesting. Listen to what he had to say here.
That behind the scenes, the technical backbone of the financial system is decades out of date, many, many years out of date. You know that. Paul and others are straightening it out, but payments and money transfers are costly and take days or even weeks to clear. Under this bill, the entire ancient system will be eligible for a 21st century upgrade using the state-of-the-art crypto technology. Who would have thought we would have been saying that 2 years after?
All right, so come on, Rupert. Why didn't he just say the word Ripple?
You know, he sounds like a Ripple salesman, right?
Yeah,
he
right.
Sounds like the best Ripple salesman. It's kind of a pinch me, I'm dreaming.
No kidding. I'm waiting for the rug pull.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
waiting for the rug pull.
You know, you're kind of waiting to wake up at this point and find out that you've been asleep for a while. But, you know, the really interesting, you mentioned SWIFT just before we went into that. Now, Larry Fink wrote a letter to his investors this year. And in that, a quote is, "But today relying on SWIFT feels like routing emails through the postal office."
Bingo.
You know, everything that's happening right now is, like you just mentioned there, you're waiting for them just to say it.
Yep.
But they're indirectly doing that. I mean, if you look at what XRP was created to do, it's exactly what Trump just said the US is embarking on. It's not just Trump, it's everybody around him.
Dead on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's dead on.
With everything happening right now, when I say this, I mean, you could argue that maybe getting into Bitcoin when it was cents or dollars was a better time to be in crypto, perhaps from an investment point of view.
Right.
But other than maybe that moment, today, I mean, we truly have, you know, you see people getting kind of backlash in regards to some of the outlandish or what seems outlandish price predictions that people throw around for XRP. The truth of the matter is, we don't know how big this monster is going to be.
That's exactly right.
If it achieves the goals that it set out to do, and there's every sign from the likes of the president just there that's going to be the case, people are way underestimating just the size of XRP because it's going to need that liquidity to enable all of this. It's an amazing time to be alive and in the crypto space.
We are talking about the leader of the free world.
Yep.
Okay. That goes on air and basically takes time to reference a financial system that is aging and immediately drafts his model into crypto. So you know that he's got, well, we know he has one ear right now being controlled by David Sacks. And then you think that there's another ear that maybe is out in the open right now that has been very connected to not only the government here in the United States, but also been connected to the payment architecture that has been building for almost 3 decades, okay? And we're talking about, and you guys probably know, the PayPal Mafia. Now, David Sacks, we all know who he is, the crypto and AI czar, also one of the original PayPal founders. He, along with Elon Musk, and another guy by the name of Peter Thiel, all of those guys are in very unique positions. And isn't it interesting that all 3 of those guys are confidants to the president of the United States?
It's extremely interesting.
Does the vector not really, it's kind of out in the open right now. Does the vector not point to something here? And I want to get your theory on where Thiel is going with Palantir.
Yep. So not just Palantir, what he's been trying to enable for money for longer than I've been alive. Peter Thiel happens to be, in my opinion, the greatest tech investor of all time. Not only does he have a remarkable ability to spot a technology and its future impact, but actually pick and enable the winners in it. Now, to talk about David Sacks very quickly, David Sacks was the COO at PayPal, brought in specifically by Thiel. I remember listening to a podcast that Sacks gave, and he couldn't have bigged Thiel up enough. He very much put him as one of the smartest individuals he's ever came across. So there's a direct link between Peter Thiel and David Sacks. There's perhaps a more important link between Thiel and his ability to understand money, revolutionize it with PayPal, which originally started out as Confinity with Max Levchin. Yeah. The story behind that very quickly, because it is interesting, was that Max was looking for somewhere to actually cool off, and he stumbled into a Stanford lecture that Thiel was giving. It's a crazy story, right? But he approached him with this idea that subsequently later became PayPal, and that was to enable digital money via Palm pages. So Palm pages were handheld devices, and Thiel obviously thought, well, I see this as the future anyway. You know, everyone's going to have a handheld device, which of course wasn't the case back then. It is today. Again, an accolade to his remarkable understanding of technologies and where they're going. And then subsequently they became X.com with Elon Musk, and then subsequently PayPal, which was the first time money was successfully digitized in any meaningful manner. There was attempts to do that beforehand with Digibyte. You had eGold. Often these didn't end very well. However, Thiel successfully created the formula along with the individuals of the PayPal Mafia that went on to essentially found the biggest tech companies of today and change the world. The interesting thing with Thiel's involvement perhaps in crypto is we know that he has funded many projects. Mm-hmm. He gave Vitalik Buterin, I think, $100,000 in a grant back in 2014, and then he subsequently went on to found Ethereum. He was also one of the first investors in OpenCoin, which subsequently then became Ripple in 2013.
Right.
So to kind of summarize what I'm getting at here, Thiel and the PayPal Mafia are unbelievably influential individuals, so much so that one of them is now the AI and crypto czar. Mm-hmm. Thiel is an unbelievable visionary when it comes to technologies. It's crazy to believe that he perhaps hasn't seen this one coming. In fact, potentially may be behind it, just publicly. And he has direct involvement with Ripple, which he was one of the early investors in with Anderson and Horowitz, Google Ventures, and I think Lightspeed Ventures.
Yeah.
So that, for me, his involvement, and you've got to think, 2013, what was the crypto space like in 2013?
Interesting.
Yeah, to say that, I mean, it was chaos, right? Nobody took it seriously. Bitcoin, I think, in 2013 started off at about $13. By the end of that year, it subsequently went to 1,000. Maybe Silk Road was the reasoning behind that, and that saga's kind of come to an end with the freeing of, or the pardoning of Ross Ulbricht. Really what I'm getting at here is just how much of an amazing tech investor Thiel is, how much of a visionary he is, and the fact that he's essentially backing and giving his stamp of approval to Ripple back in 2013. And today, to kind of draw on things that we've just spoken about, it seems in that prime position to fundamentally change money once again, which is what he's previously done with the likes of PayPal.
Do you think there's any broader implications around this from a stance of where Palantir's thesis is, which is, mostly surveillance? Obviously, they're a company that is really working on that. What is that? I think it's the total information or total awareness program. And you look at that along with what's happening right now with cross-border settlement payments now potentially. And I think this is much bigger because many people, even Garlinghouse has been on record saying, hey, we think we're going to get, 10 to 20% of SWIFT settlement. I think this is more likely to see an immediate impact on SWIFT settlement, maybe upwards of 60 to 70%.
Well,
if that were to happen, we're talking about a revamping of the global finance system and the interconnectivity of the global world banks. So with the global world banks behind that, you've got to be able to understand, I would say, almost every major infrastructure from a geopolitical standpoint. Well, there's only one company that's capable of really kind of going in that direction, and that's Palantir.
Yep.
So, and what their direction is. So I guess I'm a little fearful of where maybe Thiel is heading, but I'm also looking at, well, maybe his, there's all sorts of unique theories out there, but his connection to both finance, information, and what we're seeing now on the technology front, and now especially with AI, which will play a big role in this. I guess the question is this connection good or bad for not only Ripple, but for crypto in general?
I think Thiel is a controversial guy. Correctly, he's a controversial guy. Some of the things he says, he claims to be a libertarian whilst enabling things that perhaps fly in the face of that. That is very, it doesn't quite make sense. I think, interestingly, crypto doesn't just have purely positive ramifications for the world. It's going to fundamentally change the world in a big way. From an investment point of view, I think there's a great opportunity there. There's going to be massive winners from it, like the developing world, perhaps, that is going to be brought into this kind of global system. But the problem with a global system is if one person has control over it, and Thiel has actually spoken about this as an issue, it's, you kind of end up in a kind of totalitarian world that crypto might play a role in. And actually, Chris Larsen, always go and look at what these guys said in the early days. One thing that Chris Larsen spoke about was that the fixing of money through distributed ledgers would ultimately lead to the final piece of the globalization puzzle being finalized. You need elements when it comes to globalization. One reason it hasn't worked thus far is because of money. Yeah. Crypto is fixing that. Palantir is potentially working on this kind of global information or surveillance highway. I think there's a lot of interconnections here in regards to a push towards a more global world. Potentially dollarization is also a major part of that. So in regards to Palantir specifically, will they use and utilize crypto in the future? Potentially. We know that social medias are certainly doing that. Look at what Elon Musk's trying to do with X and X.com. That original vision that they had is now coming to fruition. What cryptos they use, well, there's probably some more obvious ones than not. But I don't know if I can draw some direct links between Palantir, but what I can draw is the fact that crypto is certainly moving us towards what seems obvious, and that is a more kind of globalized state. And whether that's ultimately a good or a bad thing is for you guys to decide.
Well, and I think, the key will be, and here's the unique thing that maybe is the bastion of hope here. If you think about the, we'll call it the Bitcoiners or the Bitcoin maxis, the Bitcoin community. Listen, I own Bitcoin. It's an asset that I would always see as a potential. I also own some Ethereum, but I believe where XRP is heading is next level. And you look at what happened at the Bitcoin conference last year, the one prior to this year, where Vance came out But last year it was Trump while he was campaigning, and he was personally, I feel, and I still am not sure. I've watched that clip I don't know how many times because I watched body language and just the whole concept of how he responded when that community reacted to him getting rid of Gensler. Okay, and the idea of firing Gensler and his true, I believe, surprise that this was a big deal. And at that time, I think maybe that was when there was 2 times when I think Trump changed his tune. It was on that day, and of course the other day was when he was shot at. Yep. So he was in a position where he realized something much bigger than probably even he thought could happen. And then I think he tapped into something that became and got him to the presidency. Many people would point at Musk or maybe even Sacks to a certain extent, but Sacks is a huge, Solana fan. He's a big crypto guy. And then of course, obviously, the Sacks connection to Peter Thiel, yep, and his connection to Ripple. All of this seems to be going in the right direction. So my point I'm getting at is that even though there could be a problem, I feel like Trump and even to a certain extent, maybe J.D. Vance, and we'll see what that looks like if Rubio is going to be his running mate for the next cycle or not. But I think these guys realize this community can move very quickly, and literally it's the true situation that we're dealing with here in the United States. And that is, fortunately we still have our defense mechanisms and we can actually revolt against things. And I think that's what the crypto community did. They revolted against banking, the structure, and it worked. And I think now you're seeing the powers that be realize that. So it's interesting to see whether they'll cross the line of control. Now I have one more clip I want to play, and I want to get your attention or your opinion on this. This was Hester Peirce. We had Hester on a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to play this clip for you guys because this is very interesting. And basically what it's about is the SEC wants to open crypto to retail. And I tweeted this out, and I think a lot of people got my communication wrong, is I wasn't talking about retail investment. Let me play this clip for you so you guys can understand a little bit.
Let's talk a little bit about that EO. So it instructs the Department of Labor and the SEC to adjust their rules and regulations to allow those retirement accounts to invest in private assets, to invest in crypto, or at least to allow it. How will the SEC approach this? What does that checklist look like?
Katie, it's great to be here. I think we've already started that process of opening the private markets to retail and thinking about ways that we can get them access in a way that's diversified, professionally managed, and consistent with their investing timeframes. And so I think we'll just continue with that work.
Appreciate that context. So as we continue on and as you approach this, talk us through some of the potential risks that you're thinking about, because certainly a lot of folks on Wall Street and elsewhere have been anticipating these rule changes, but there's also a lot of concern, too, about putting what are risky assets in retirement accounts.
Yes, I think those are legitimate concerns. What we've seen, of course, is that the public markets are dominated by several large companies, and also companies are waiting longer to go public, and so we're looking for a way for retail to get earlier access to the growth of companies. And so that's really the goal of it.
Let's talk.
All right. So retail to get earlier access to these growth companies. And you look at the winners of who that's going to be going into a lot of these potential 401ks. Obviously, this will roll into ETFs, which are more structured capital. XRP is in the right place at the right time. Do you think that, and this is something that Steven said from Canary Capital, is that this next move for XRP, especially around ETFs and now 401ks, potentially seeing Ripple as a next generation company, do you think this will start to separate the pack for XRP and its longtime holders?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the ramifications of the ETFs, the 401ks, being able to actually access these investments is going to really change the course that XRP is on, because what that's going to do is unlock a hell of a lot of liquidity that's going to be able to flow into it. You know, you talk about 401ks, you're talking about, I think, $7-8 trillion, $9 trillion, something like that. You talk about traditional investors that like to invest in traditional assets. They're still largely siloed from the cryptocurrency space.
Exactly.
Once that unlock takes place, I mean, you're talking of trillions upon trillions of dollars that I'm not saying are going to flow into XRP, but could. And that could is a big thing. You know, if you look at what we've seen with Bitcoin and its ETF, the most successful ETF in history. Ethereum actually isn't that far behind. I think it's third in regards to the fastest ETF to get to $10 billion. I actually think XRP is going to surprise everybody, because I think people know what's going on with it from an institutional point of view. It can't just be us on the peripheries that understand this. It has to be sort of the people that this technology is going to affect. They have to have looked into it. It would be bad due diligence not to. Once you see that ETF approval, which I think is going to come in September, I think everything points to that, including some of the conversations I've had with ETP providers. I think you're going to see miraculous things, and I think that's going to set us up for a pretty explosive back end of 2025 and beyond. I think crypto goes on more of a broad trajectory than just following the kind of mundane 4-year cycles. As a result of everything going on, there's always a danger by saying this time is different, but everything points to this time being different. And I think XRP, what's really going to separate it from the pack, talking about the rest of the cryptocurrency market, is it doing what it was designed to. And that is to become a sort of global bridge currency. Because the sky's the limits for XRP. If you think about assets, people always say that XRP can't get to these kind of valuations due to market cap. Market cap is really irrelevant. People are comparing XRP as an asset to the likes of perhaps the stock market. The largest stock that we have today is Microsoft. I think today it's about $3.9 trillion. People couldn't imagine back in the 1980s that we could get to a $3.9 trillion stock, when the largest stock in the 1980s was IBM at $39 billion. That's 100x today. So in terms of valuations for XRP in the future, we really have no idea what money. Well, we've got an idea of the fact that money under this system is going to continue to proliferate, meaning things will get bigger in terms of monetary terms. But we have no idea just what the real world implementation of this technology is going to do for demand when you have all the other demand catalysts, perhaps more so with XRP strategy companies that are going to form. You know, the sky really is the limit. And what we're seeing is an asset class, not just for XRP, actually being enabled to be one. Crypto has literally not been enabled to be an asset class up until this point. And I think with those ETFs, we've got an amazing time ahead of us.
Well, and you know, the point that Hester Peirce was getting at is that, listen, they're trying to open this up to retail, and you know, people were thinking, you know, this is the average Joe, and I'm saying no, this is actually, because the average Joe has been able to get to assets for the last 5 years, 10 years. They've been able to get to them, and even more so in the last 36 months. I think even average people who have never stepped into one crypto exchange ever before have realized how easy it is to, you know, go in and get a crypto asset. But the context that is interesting to me that I think everybody missed on Peirce's information is that you're talking about U.S. businesses and high net worth individuals. That's the retail that she's talking about. She's not talking about the average Joe investor that, you know, has 25K in crypto or in stocks and bonds. We're talking about businesses that are representing almost $5 trillion in liquid assets today, just in the United States, that are saying, wait a minute, I need something, one, that can either earn yields or that I can put into an asset that can start to accumulate. And of course, this is the thing that they've looked at with stocks. Now we're starting to see that maybe with crypto, 401ks, and what we will see in an ETF, I think, coming very soon. So that's the reason I think that retail, which is the retail she's talking about, has been never served before in the crypto market. So that's the big difference right now. Let me ask you this question. There's been some reports out there of wallets starting to move large amounts of XRP. from centralized exchanges. Is that something that you're concerned about? Is this something you feel like is just normal due diligence on proper security measures? What are your thoughts about that?
Could be a host of different things, like I think many of these things turn out to be. You know, you could have people sort of anchoring down and taking this XRP into more kind of a self-custody, or perhaps taking them off exchanges to secure in a kind of safer manner. There is always exchange risk. I was a victim of that in 2018 with an exchange called Cryptopia. Everyone kind of relived that later on with FTX. So I think that's probably going on. I think there's probably accumulation taking place. You know, XRP from a price point of view is at a stage where it's about to embark on price discovery. It's had an attempt at it with that run that we saw on the back end of last year. It's been pulling back since then, but it's going back at it once again. And the pullback that we've seen around all-time highs, the meek nature of it is very telling of what's to come. So it makes sense to me that people would be taking XRP off of exchanges to kind of hoard it, knowing what's perhaps to come, signaled technically when you look at the charts, and also fundamentally with the things that are taking place in the United States, and specifically around Ripple and the usage of XRP.
The note I just showed there, XRP gaining 8% a week, banks adopting its ledger. Obviously, we're seeing whales buy in at I think around $1 billion. And then obviously the case settling is starting to move things in. Let's talk about next level partners that could come to what's happening with Ripple and the ecosystem. We've already seen nation states, a litany of banks that have been brewing and have kind of seen the writing on the wall. It was really just a matter of regulatory clarity here in the US, which has happened now.
Yep.
Do you think that we will see even bigger partnerships now, or do you feel like Ripple has already set the chess pieces in place? How far do you think they are in their development?
Yeah, I think that we've already seen some pretty big partnerships. You know, Ripple as a company is alleged to have around about 300 financial institutions that they've been public about. There's the notion that there's around about 1,700 NDAs out there.
Yeah.
Now, those partnerships may come to fruition. And you've got to think, again, if XRP is successful, and XRP to Ripple is really its secret sauce. It's really what this innovation is all about. You know, Ripple offer a number of services. The secret sauce and the revolution here, or the evolution, is XRP.
Yeah.
I think if XRP is going to be successful and is going to become that world reserve bridge asset, all of these big financial institutions are going to have to get on board. Now they've got the legal clarity to do so. And I wouldn't be surprised within those 1,700 NDAs if you don't already have many of them. They just haven't been able to publicly come out and say it. So the world is going to have to embrace this technology. I think XRP is in that prime position, which means that institutions are going to have to adopt it.
Yeah, for sure. If you look at the institutional adoption at the scale in which it could happen and the speed, if you look at what the Trump's administration has been able to do in basically 8 months and apply that to next generation finance, especially around the Fed decision next month, because I think this is going to be the catalyst. Besson has already been pushing for 1.5 points and believes that this should be a much more aggressive cut. Everybody now starting to say, I think Polymarket on 50 basis points went from a 2% to almost 12% in a matter of a week. Wow. So, and this is very early, but the point being is, if this Fed rate cut really does get an assessment and an adjustment, and we've seen it, you know, central banks have been cutting for a while in the UK. You've seen it around the world. What do you think that does to the crypto markets if we do get a 50 basis point cut?
It's going to give markets more broadly a green light. One reason markets have been somewhat hesitant and experienced a lot of the volatility that they've seen is due to uncertainty around monetary policy, not just in the United States, but more broadly afield. However, for example, the ECB is at nearly half the policy rate that the US is at. It's been very reluctant. And I think once markets get, what I think markets broadly, and crypto is a higher beta really for markets.
Right.
What crypto markets are really looking at is clarity. Jerome Powell and the Fed not cutting interest rates, not cutting interest rates, not cutting interest rates, and being vague and very much saying the same thing doesn't give markets that footing to kind of launch upon. When you get that rate cut, I think more significantly than anything, what that's going to show to markets is, okay, it's time, rates are coming down,
Right.
money creation is likely going to increase. One thing in my experience that markets hate is uncertainty. That rate cut is going to give certainty. One thing I want to really emphasize or put across as well is there's a narrative out there that we need rate cuts for markets to do well.
Yeah.
They're certainly going to help markets, and markets are forward looking, and we'll be expecting that. That's probably why they've done so well thus far. But if you look at the fact that we had the fastest rate hiking cycle in history, look at where markets are today.
Yeah,
We've
exactly.
done that in the context of high rates. When that cut comes in, it could have pretty big ramifications for markets, certainly through providing that certainty. And crypto does well in that context.
Yeah, you look at the S&P 500 right now. There's the chart. Right now, breaking what looks to be another all-time high at 64.
Yep.
We're at 6,500 coming in. Tom Lee has been on. This is the guy from Fundstrat right now, very bullish on crypto in general. But you look at that, and of course, we have to give Bitcoin its homage. It had an amazing run up to its all-time high, and now, of course, has retraced significantly back down on a big red candle this morning. Liquidity coming out, so we're trading at around 118 as we record this after yesterday hitting an all-time high. What do you make of that? Bitcoin just doing Bitcoin things, or is this something broader in terms of maybe a shift finally in the market to secondary players?
Yeah, I think crypto is just doing what crypto does, right? People always forget how volatile it is. In part of my assessment of what's going to happen with crypto, I do look at traditional financial markets. I think if you look at what people haven't spoken about what the S&P has done this year enough.
Yep.
And Mike Wilson from Morgan Stanley actually came out and said, that pullback that we had on the back end of tariffs was the bear market, and we're now in a new bull market. As a technical trader, we follow trends. There was an invalidation of the trend that the S&P had clearly been in since 2013. And we said the way that corrects itself so that there isn't further contagion and continuation to the downside is by resuming the trend and going on and putting in a new high. It did that. As a technical analyst, you know that when that takes place, not only that strength was very telling that we saw on the back end of the sort of tariff catastrophe in regards to how markets at least perceived it.
Right.
We always took the alternative and said that trade isn't going to cease, and actually, there's going to be a middle ground here. There's going to be a better scenario than the one that was painted. Once we saw that kind of entire retracement, that's really signaling us for continuation. And the interesting thing with Bitcoin is when you look at Bitcoin divided by the S&P, it's in a clear uptrend, and we expect continuation for that, which is bullish not just for Bitcoin, but also the S&P, and reflective of a generally good economic environment, I think. But if there's one bit of perhaps advice I can give people, it's to ignore day-to-day price action and to focus on the bigger trends. Because crypto, if you focus on day-to-day price action, I had a full head of hair when I started this.
It'll drive you crazy.
Learned very quickly not to do that. So yeah.
I think a lot of people are starting to recognize. You're mentioning something we've talked about on the channel, on the main channel, quite a bit, and that is this chart right here. That is the pullback, that we're referencing. If you look at February, really right after, I guess, tariff day, that was an 18. First of all, 21% if you go all the way to the wick, but that's a 21% pullback, guys, in the S&P 500. That's an insane number and I think back to your point of what they were saying, that was the bear market.
Yes.
You're looking right at it. That was it. That was the response that the market had. Obviously, we're beyond that now. Everybody is looking forward that all these tariff scenarios are really on the back half of this. It's really more about details now, about trying to sign something and get these done going forward. So let's last couple of things I want to hit on with XRP for many of you, because everybody's always looking at XRP as a potential in terms of price discovery. Yep. After we saw the high here recently hovering around 360, 370, do you feel that XRP has a high in it again in 2025?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the back end of this year is going to be pretty sensational. I think we're in August, September. There's seasonality to markets. This goes right back to the days of when markets were largely centered around agriculture.
Right.
The seasonality still has played and has an effect today. Markets driven by human beings. What are human beings doing right now? They're on holiday, rightfully so, you know. But when people kind of get back to some normality, we have August, September. September's typically not a great month. That could coincide with ETF launches. ETF launches have often, you know, that kind
That'll
of...
be the explosion.
Absolutely. I think you're really going to have a hot end to the year. October, November. I think if you also, people are still looking at the Bitcoin 4-year cycle, and there's going to be an element of that plays out into the future with the halving. Probably altcoins move away from it a little bit, but there'll still be maybe a bit of a drag.
Yeah.
If you look at where we are in regards to that cycle, we're at a point when it starts to heat up. And this is taking place when Bitcoin dominance, we believe, is now into the downtrend due to technically what's going on. Ethereum versus BTC has now shown more strength than it has throughout this entire Bitcoin dominance cycle, which is telling of what's to come. There's a shift towards altcoins. This is typically when the most explosive part from a price action point of view takes place. And you've got every catalyst, including the president of the free world, literally talking about crypto. Everything is coming to a head. Ripple has a kind of unique positioning in that in regards to its own specific news. I don't think people are bullish enough. In fact, I think you are going to see insane things. Our price prediction for XRP in the not too distant future is around about $19.27. And that's based on the wedge that everybody's looking at. Beyond that, how do you value XRP?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. You're talking about blue ocean discovery at that point, because if we're at close to $20 on XRP, that means something major has happened. We've obviously, and I think it'll be a combination of things, ETF, the potential of what we'll see in terms of 401k assets possibly shifting into Ripple and XRP. But bigger, I think, is the connection to the currency system. And that will be the replacement of SWIFT. So all those kind of catalysts right there gets back to your point. And I've heard crazy numbers. I'm not one of those that believes we're in, going to see, a $500 to $1,000 XRP, at least not anytime soon. What does it have in the future? Who knows? My price target has always been in the next 12 months around $60. And that is based off of these particular catalysts continuing to play out, if they in fact do. And if you look at the price action right now, I'll just go over to the chart for you guys. One thing that we've been continually watching is our sentiment. This is a chart trading tool that we built some years ago. Tracks trade sentiment. It tracks all the sentiment on social and then overlays that into a Pine script that we built for tracking this, and it's called the MSI, Market Sentiment Index. And we tracked two key things. This was an all-time high back here in, what was that? Right there on mid-July. We had an all-time high MSI on XRP, and of course we had that run-up that was happening during that period of time. Then we had another one right back here, and this one, of course, was on August 3rd. Another run-up that has happened. So when we start to see that MSI reacting, sentiment in general, and it gets back to how powerful this community is, price action usually ensues. So it's very interesting to watch for this community. Rupert, where can they find you? What's the best place?
Yeah, the best place to find me is on YouTube. Obviously, Allin Crypto, if you type that up, will come up. If you want to give me a follow over on Twitter, Real Allin Crypto is where you'll find me, at Real Allin Crypto. Yep. They're the two best places to stay up to date with everything that we're covering. Obviously, on Twitter, we cover pretty much anything that we can as it relates to the cryptocurrency space broadly. We've got a great team that helped me do that. And obviously on YouTube, again, at Real Allin Crypto. If you type in Allin Crypto, we'll come up. We do daily market updates. We dive into projects that we like, such as XRP. And we dive into the space broadly, as you do yourself, Paul, and you're doing an amazing job of it. So if you want to find me, they're the best places to do so.
Good. I'm going to find you back on this podcast again.
Look forward to it
soon. So let's do it. We love to get to the top of the community and really kind of give some connections here. So thanks for coming in today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, the pleasure is all mine, Paul. Thank you very much.
You bet. Excellent. All right, guys, if you are not checking us out, of course, you can do that over on YouTube right now. If you're catching this on the audio version of the podcast, you can find it's just on the Paul Barron podcast or on Paul Barron Network. Both those channels work, but all of the XRP content is focused here on Paul Barron Podcast. So that's where you want to find us. And we'll see you soon right here on the XRP Podcast. Take care.